Right, so now I'm going to get to work on the gearbox mount. I wasn't going to do it today, but I figure I can get the floodlight out, and I don't know, I might be able to do it before the sun goes down. Basically, the battery has to come out, battery tray has to come out, and then we should be able to see the mount. Jack has to go under it, and then there's a bolt in the wheel arch behind the arch lining on the left that has to be undone to get the mount out, which you might be able to do with the wheel turned with the car on the floor, but while it's up on the lift, I've got more clearance basically because of the suspension being at full droop. Well, I might turn the wheel quickly now before I get started. Put the battery and the battery tray out. Battery is obviously the 10mm terminals on top, and then battery holder and battery tray bolts are all 13mm. That just lifts out. So now we can see the top gearbox mount, which we need to get to. There's quite a few bolts here. So that holds the back of the mount on. I've just realised some of my torque sockets and my adapters so that my other torque sockets fit are all in the boot, which obviously I can't open with the power off. So I've hooked jump leads up to the battery terminals, literally just to open the boot. And I've just grabbed literally everything out of it just in case. Right, figured out the trick to getting this bottom left bolt out. You have to get the front mount back off, so definitely do this at the same time as the front one if you're doing them, and then lower it down off the jack so it's completely supported by the other three mounts. And then this should come out under the clutch pipe. Let's see if I can wrestle it out. Put the camera down and show you when it's out. With the mount out, there's just T55 in there to undo, which I'll do now. So that releases this arm bracket part in the middle. And now I'm going to just turn my camera torch on and then start recording again. Now the bushing should just push in like that. I hope. That's not too bad. Assuming this is a hydro bushing and it's split, judging by the oil coming out of it, it may have been a good idea to replace that, but quickly look at the prices of these and debate whether I'm putting it back together today or ordering a new one and doing it when it arrives. Nothing can ever be simple, can it? Right, new engine mount arrived on Tuesday. I ordered it Monday. Nevlog are super quick at dispatching and one-day postage. Definitely very helpful when you're trying to get stuff done. It's now, what day is it, Wednesday? Could have fitted it earlier probably, but I'm trying to avoid working on the car in the dark just because it makes for awful video. So I'm going to fit the Powerflex bushing now. Some silicone spray lube, just so I don't want the insert to rub on the inside of the bushing and cause it to fail prematurely. I did ask in one of the VXR owners' Facebook groups, apparently they all look like that. Like, they come from the factory sort of perished and cracked, but it should be fine. It's just what they're like. I'm going to spray this up now and then get the insert pressed in and bolt it back together. There you go, that's pretty easy. I did this with brake cleaner. You can see where oil's been coming out of the original gearbox mount and gone all over it. I'm just going to wipe that up. So this metal plate goes on first, I guess, to spread the load from the bracket across the plastic insert, and then this way up. Bracket goes on, flip it over, and it bolts in from the back. There we go, all bolted together. Alright, so I've now got literally only the rear engine mount attached, and this is still too tight to get back into the hole it came out of. I'm struggling for other ideas other than just push it and hope it clears the slip eventually. Wiggle it a bit, but yeah, this is infuriating, honestly. There's not much more I can do, like take the entire, take the rear engine mount off as well and get a hoist. Really doesn't want to go in. Took as long as you could possibly imagine, but in, finally. So we can start getting them screws in, get the other side put back together, and get this side put together, finally. This is literally taking so long it's got dark. I've had to remove both of the other engine mounts again to get the gearbox mount to line up. This is proving to be a massive pain. But basically, if you can see, the edge of the yellow bushing there has been fouling on the edge of the gearbox, because everything was just too far off to one side. So I couldn't lift the gearbox up to get the holes to line up, and it just wouldn't pop past. So yeah, the engine's just dropped down. I now try and move it over enough that I can lift it up without it fouling. I think now there's a gap, but I barely feel or see that. Yeah, it feels like there's a gap under there. Hoik it up a bit with the jack. Fingers crossed these holes start to line up. Otherwise I have an engine just dangling by the rear mount, which is not great. We do seem to be getting there, although this bolt's stuck. Let's go down a bit. Maybe pull these out for good measure. Just put them out of the way for a second. Here we go. Cooking with something. This is the first time it's looked even remotely aligned today. Just barely out of line. I can probably push the engine to get those to line up a bit better. I'm just gonna pull like that. We were a bit closer, but they're still binding when I try and thread them in. Right, so those are all screwed in hand tight as far as I'll go without moving the jack around. Just enough threads to not risk damaging everything, and bushing now clears the edge of the gearbox, which is nice. Something to be aware of. None of this lines up very well with that insert sort of in the way. So I've got to get that front one to line up down there, and these are completely out as well. So I might see if I can now take the jack off that side, put it under the sump, and pull this side into line. Grab the floodlight so you guys can see what I'm doing, and then give that a try. Turns out I'm not that lucky, and the very top of this bolt hole has definitely cross-threaded, and it's just ripping the threads off the bolts when I try and put them in. So yeah, tap and die set and a new set of bolts, unfortunately, before I can get this bloody thing put back together. Right, so I've got a set of taps. These are M10 by 1.5. It's the same size as the screws for the engine mounts, which I've got a new set of genuine ones, just to give it the best chance of working, basically. I've just run the tap through by hand, and it has made a nice clean thread that the bolt does go into. Slightly concerned as to the strength of that thread. I mean, you can see how easy it threads in and out, but obviously with it having been messed up in the past, I'm not going to go cranking on this with an impact. So for the first time in 2 weeks, the car's back on the ground. That's a relief. I'm going to start it up, check that there's no rattles or anything, and then probably in the next video you'll see my first impressions, sort of before and after driving it with the new mounts. I think this car is possessed. What on earth is going on? Yeah, it really doesn't want to start. I'm wondering if it's just the battery's low, like too low for it to do anything. Like it's struggling to even turn off the check lights or turn the screen on or anything. I guess I can plug this OBD in, check the voltage. There's some horrendous noises coming from everywhere. Gonna check the voltage in torque. Right, so yeah, according to torque, the battery voltage is incredibly low, which is probably what's causing the downright unhinged behaviour of the car. I might trickle charge the battery. I do have a C-Tech charger set up with a spare adapter to bolt onto the battery leads somewhere. The battery's been out of the car for 2 weeks basically, and it's freezing. Otherwise I can wait till Courtney comes home and jumpstart the car with the Mini. Not ideal, but hopefully that gets it back to working state and there's not some wiring issue to figure out as well. With that said, I trickle charged the car overnight, and thankfully the next day it fired right up. VXR for a little drive and talk about how the engine mounts and the gearbox mount have affected driving the car and living with it. This was going to be a first impressions, but it has ended up not being, because basically I drove the car for a week, didn't find time to record this little clip, and then went to America for nearly 2 weeks. Came back, drove it for another week, and here we are, finally found time around my uni work and stuff to actually take the car out for a drive and get a little video. I was trying to find time when it would be light so you can see what's in front and my face, beautiful face, a bit better, but I've just not had the time. So this will have to do. The first impressions might have been good for getting my reaction to sort of how different it was. It was very different, but we'll get to that in a second. But actually I think having lived with it for a few weeks probably gives a better impression, because the mounts have changed a fair bit since they were fitted. So, getting to that first impression, with them fitted, it is like a different car. Again, like same as after the anti-roll bar goes on, you fit one of those, you know what I mean? Like it feels like a much more planted, almost completely different car. It's more responsive on turning. It actually shifts gears smoother and picks up when you put your foot down or let off much more sort of without a delay. and you feel more connected to the car basically. You do something with the pedals and the car's going to respond instantly, as opposed to the engine rocking, taking up the slack in the mounts and then taking off or slowing down, which is what it would do with the standard mount. And obviously you get the same effect with cornering, with the engine sloshing left to right in the engine bay, which is why these are such a good upgrade for track use, or even just sort of spirited backlane blasting. So yeah, all around, like, very noticeable improvement in handling and precision. Now, the vibration is a thing a lot of people worry about. Like, you don't want the car to be harsh and make you not want to drive it, basically, which I get. I don't drive this enough to have cared either way. If it was really bad, I drive it 2 or 3 times a week now, really, and there's always another car that I can use or cycle to work. But honestly, vibration-wise, it is barely any worse than stock. You might have been able to hear through this entire thing a piece of trim on the dash, sort of, not rattling, but like crackling this whole time. That has just started today, and that's the only really annoying noise it started making. So I can't really fault them for harshness. Like, if you bring the clutch up quickly in first, that vibrates quite loudly. Like, the labouring effect you get is probably 3 times worse than it would be in a standard car, but generally you don't want to be labouring it anyway. I mean, I know mine on the stock map just doesn't speed up when you labour it, so there's no point doing it. It's not like a diesel or like a modern direct injection car where you put your foot down even at 1,000 revs and with a twin scroll turbo they just speed up. This doesn't do that, so there's almost no point. Like, it takes a while to pick up if you put your foot flat. If I was in a high enough gear for it to labour, it just wouldn't speed up at all anyway. So yeah, that's pretty much fine. Motorway, notice no difference. I'd say the cabin's a bit boomier in general. Like, I've got the rear of this exhaust is hard mounted on bobbins rather than normal hangers, so it is going to be boomy in the back of the car. I would say that's got slightly worse, but otherwise, like, it's not bad. The first week that the mounts were fitted, I didn't drive it much, but I drove it enough to realise, like, the harshness was actually worse, the noise, vibration and harshness. Like, considerably worse than it is now. I think what happened is I did a long drive down to Donington to Marshall, and it did improve, like, significantly after that, and after the mounts had been sat in the car while I was away for 2 weeks. So I guess, you know, as they've got weight on them, the rubber softens up, and not the smoothest road to do a pull down, but yeah, as they've got weight on them, the rubber softens up and they just get a little bit nicer. I've heard that, like, the 1,000 to 2,000 RPM range really smoothens out after about 1,000 miles. Whether that's true or not, we are yet to find out, because I've only done like 150 or 200 miles. Most of that was in one journey to Donington Park and back. But yeah, all in all, definitely worth the upgrade. We'll see how they do on track. I mean, you can chuck this thing into a corner now, short shifting. When you let off, it will, like, the back will snap round, which it never used to do before, even with the anti-roll bar on the second stiffest setting. So on track, it'll be definitely very interesting to be able to chuck it into some corners, get the back loose. And that brings me on to what the next video is going to be. So after this one, I have some braided brake lines from Courtenay Sport sat in the kitchen waiting to go on, some racing or performance brake fluid so I couldn't get any RBF or anything on short notice. So the car's going back in the air. I'm changing the brake fluid because I don't think it's been done in years, and fitting braided lines. And then I am going on a track day to Donington Park, which I've marshalled 5 or 6 times now, something like that, 5 times, and done marshal training day there for fire safety and stuff. So it's a great first track for me to go to for my first ever track day. We've got Ryan in the S3 coming, he might have seen in the Santa Pod video I did, Bailey in the ST, who blew his clutch up in that same video, and Ben in the
GT86, who also went with us. So it'll be interesting seeing if this, with a few handling mods, can keep up with a 380 horsepower S3 or 240 horsepower ST, both of which are a fair bit more modern. Can't help myself. I was expecting the back to come around, to be honest, and it just understeered. It's interesting. So yeah, that's pretty much all I've got for this video. Overall, I do rate the Vibratechnics. If you're daily in the car, it's still going to be nice to live with. Nice enough anyway. Like, some of the dash rattles can get annoying, but I mean, once the car's warmed up, you can see this one has gone. You can't hear it anymore, at least. Yeah, can't fault them. Definitely worth the money. So, if you liked the video and you want to see that next one where the XR finally gets some track time, do us a subscribe, maybe like, maybe drop a comment, see what you'd like to see next. There's not much more in store for the car for 2023, to be honest. It's going to get probably a standalone conversion or a front mount, see if we can get 300 horsepower out of it, and then mostly left alone, and just there'll be lots of track content, hopefully, if we can afford it. It's a bloody expensive hobby. And then the Mini should be getting a bit more attention. Courtney wants to put an exhaust on that and do an intercooler and tune it, and that should also be 300 horsepower, so be a good little matchup, Mini versus VXR. But yeah, that's all I've got for this video. See you in the next one.